Hi, I'm Isabella Medeiros, and I am presenting Unit 1, Lesson 3. The vocabulary words you're going to need to know for this lesson are republic. A republic is a country that has a government where power is held by people who are elected. Direct democracy. The people control the government themselves. Representative democracy. The people choose leaders to make laws for their country. Common good. The benefit or interest of everyone. And interest groups. Groups of people that have the same views. What did the founders learn about government from the Romans? 2,000 years before our nation began, there was a republic that influenced the ideas of the founders. A republic is a country that has a government where power is held by people who are elected. The Roman Republic was a government that lasted 500 years. Citizens delegate their power to leaders they elect to represent them. What advantages did the founders see in a republican government? The founders thought that with having a republican government, we would have some of the same benefits the Romans enjoyed. Some of those benefits are, we elect representatives to serve the common good, representatives make the laws, which is more efficient, and it gives people a say in their government. What were the disadvantages of a republican government? It works best in small communities, the people have to be very much alike, and interest groups can form. How did the founders adapt the idea of a republican government? In a direct democracy, the people control the government themselves. In a republican government, the representatives control the government for the people. James Madison wanted America to have a republican government. James Madison decided that members of government will be elected by a large group of people instead of a small group. This kind of government is now called a representative democracy. Why should citizens promote the common good? Contributing to the common good involves accepting the responsibility to engage in the political and civic process that will ensure that all citizens benefit from the policies and decisions made by Congress, legislators, judges, and other decision makers.
What exactly is the common good? The common good can be helpfully understood as an ideal and a moral measure. As an ideal, the common good points to a state of affairs, a world in which all the conditions are in place that would allow everyone to reach their full potential as persons and communities. Conditions such as access to good education and healthcare, safe housing, fair wages, and the ability to participate in political and cultural life. In this sense, the common good won't ever be fully realized, but it does provide us with a goal to work toward. The common good is also a moral measure, a tool we can use to evaluate whether our choices, policies, and institutions align with this ideal. For example, do my purchasing decisions reflect merely self-interested concern for my own well-being and status, or do I try to spend my money in ways that align with environmental sustainability? Do I live simply so that more of my resources can be dedicated to meeting the basic needs of others?
Civic virtue was one of the most important parts of the classical Republican philosophy. It was the idea that citizens should put aside their own self-interest in favor of the common good of their communities and countries. The American founders had read about the Roman leader Cincinnatus, who they believed was a model of civic virtue that should be emulated by Americans. In the year 460 BC, Rome was in great danger. An army from the east was burning and plundering the countryside. The enemy surrounded the defending Roman army on all sides. The leaders of the government of Rome decided to ask Cincinnatus, a skilled military leader, to help them during this crisis. The government leaders sent messengers asking Cincinnatus to serve as dictator of the country for as long as the crisis might last. Cincinnatus was a hard-working farmer with only 4 acres of land. When the messengers found him, he was quietly plowing the fields. Because he loved his country, he left his plow to go to Rome to lead the army. In a battle that lasted 2 days, his army defeated the enemy and saved the country. In gratitude, the people of Rome honored and praised Cincinnatus. But when the crisis was over, Cincinnatus did not try to remain as dictator of his country. He did not want continued power. Instead, he returned to his home and his life as a farmer and a citizen. By returning to his home, Cincinnatus showed that he valued being a good citizen of Rome more than he valued fame and personal power.
Why is civic virtue necessary for a Republican government to work well? Civic virtue means that both citizens and leaders set aside their private interests and personal concerns for the common good. The founders thought civic virtue was important to make the government work well. James Madison believed that people usually work in self-interest, so he thought the pursuit of self-interest can help promote the common good.
What do you think? Part 1, Question 1. The American colonies' characteristics consist of occupied large territory, the people had many different regions and beliefs, and many different ways of life. Question 2, Part 1. Madison thought it was possible because he observed what the Romans did and what the English did. Then he determined what worked and what didn't, and came up with the new form of government. Part 2. I believe that the evidence would be that the type of government still exists today as the representative democracy. What do you think? Part 2, Question 1, Part 1. Common good means that which is good for the community as a whole. The common good in this story is Cincinnatus because he loved his country and left his farm to go to Rome to fight the battle. Part 2. The self-interest is that he went back to his farm after the battle instead of staying in the army. Part 3. I agree with the actions of Cincinnatus of returning to be a good civilian of Rome because that's what makes him happy. Question 2. A leader in our nation that I think represents civic virtue is our mayor, Carlos A. Jimenez. During this pandemic, he has done several things to keep us safe, like communicating and enforcing CDC guidelines. What do you think? Part 3, Question 3. Some situations where I think I should put the common good above my own interest are wearing a mask in public areas, maintaining social distancing, before quarantine community service, and I hope to have the opportunity of volunteering again. Question 4. Some situations where I might want to put myself before the common good in my house would be taking a nap instead of helping with laundry, staying indoors instead of going out and being faced with situations that might involve other people. What do you think? Part 4. Some situations in which people might disagree about what's best for the common good. In town hall meetings, police reforming, COVID-19 vaccines. Part 2. What should be done when there are such disagreements and why? Find a common ground. Listen to both sides. Trusting our leaders. Voting. We know the idea of civic virtue was one of the most important parts of the classical Republican philosophy. We need to trust that our leaders will make decisions that will be good for the community. It starts by electing candidates that have done something positive for the community. In issues that today we are facing, such as the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, finding a common ground and listening to both sides will help create change. Therefore, I think this is what should be done. What do you think? Part 5, Number 1. I think we can rely upon civic virtue of most citizens to promote the common good. For example, in my school, administrations, parents, and students want to return to our building. We all agree that safety is the number one priority. Overall, when push comes to shove, most people will do right by their families, friends, and neighbors. Number 2. I think we could rely upon the civic virtue of most people elected to serve in the government to promote the common good. Keep in mind these leaders were elected. The people voted for them. In my city, our mayor is enforcing CDC guidelines for the protection of citizens. Maybe not every decision he makes is going to make everyone happy, but if he has supported reasoning, we need to trust him. Above the mayor is our governor. Since there are different chains of command, there are checks and balances. Above all, these people chose to serve in the community with the intent to make a better place to live. Number 3. If people all pursue their self-interest, the common good will be promoted. This would only work if everyone's self-interest would also benefit their country, city, and/or community. Generalizing it to all people would not promote the common good. Unfortunately, there is evil, and not all would pursue their own self-interest and keep everyone else in mind also. Number 4. If people all pursue their economic self-interest, the country will not be more prosperous and the common good will not necessarily be promoted. My reasoning behind this would be for our country to be prosperous, we need leaders and civilians who understand that yes, it's important to pursue self-interest, but keeping in mind that we need to find a balance between what is good for ourselves and what is good for others and our environment. For an organization like Walt Disney's, who has personal buildings and equipment for recycling, all of this doesn't benefit their economic expenses. However, it's important for them to keep their environment clean and healthy for their guests. What do you think, part 6? Number 5. I suppose Madison thought we could not rely upon civic virtue alone to be sure government would promote the common good because he accepted John Locke's view of the human nature. John Locke believed people often act in their self-interest. Number 6. If we cannot rely upon civic virtue alone to ensure the government promotes the common good, government representatives might think of themselves first when taking their job. By thinking of themselves, it could in its own way further the common good by contributing to their communities. For example, a politician took the job for fame, money, power, etc., also donated, volunteered, supported its community.